The separatist movement was a fairly diverse collection of political and economic interests, a coalition whose members ranged from isolationists to expansionist conquerors, from noble political idealists to opportunistic corporate executives. The Confederacy of Independent Systems ostensibly gave all of its members a say in the separatist parliament, but the real power in the Confederacy was held by those who funded its military forces. The privileged few who sat on the Separatist Council. This group of executives and senators most notably included the leaders of the Trade Federation, the most well-known separatist corporation, but there were other major corporate backers of the Confederacy as well. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the 4 other major separatist corporations, their histories, and what they actually did to get so rich and powerful.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
In 22 BBY, shortly before the start of the Clone Wars, the Separatist Council was formed on Geonosis when the Council's members signed a treaty pledging to combine their private droid armies into the CIS military. From that point forward, the Council has dictated much of the CIS's policy, overseeing military funding, war production, and even some elements of the Confederacy's strategy. The Separatist Council would remain the de facto ruling body of the CIS, able to more or less ignore the dictates of the Separatist Parliament most of the time, until they were all slaughtered on Mustafar at the end of the war. The Separatist Council was chaired by Count Dooku, the Confederacy's head of state, with General Grievous, the supreme commander of the droid armies, serving as vice chair, replacing Dooku after his death in the Battle of Coruscant. Below Grievous, the Council's members were ranked according to how much funding they contributed to the war effort, with Newt Gunray, Viceroy of the Trade Federation, ranking the highest. There were 9 full members of the Separatist Council below the Count and the General. A few were just especially powerful senators. These were Senator Tikes of the Calamari sector, Senator Rogwa Radrata of the Philium sector, and Senator Po Nudo of Ando. Another, Poggle the Lesser, was the Archduke of Geonosis. The other 5 were powerful corporate executives: Newt Gunray of the Trade Federation, Wat Tambor of the Techno Union, Shu Mei of the Commerce Guild, Sandhill of the InterGalactic Banking Clan, and Pascal Argente of the Corporate Alliance. We've already done a full video discussing the Trade Federation, so it's the latter 4 companies that we're going to be talking about today, starting with the Techno Union. The Techno Union was essentially a lobbying group made up of a broad group of powerful technology and manufacturing firms. Most of the galaxy's industrial power players were Techno Union members, as were a number of smaller and more obscure companies involved in fields like droid manufacturing, some of which the Techno Union owned outright and managed for its own purposes. The Techno Union represented its main members' interest in the Senate and lobbied Republic regulators on their behalf, and it also mediated between its members, ostensibly to ensure fair commerce, although in practice, most of what it did was facilitate price fixing. It's unclear whether or not this was the Techno Union's original purpose, and it's also unknown when the conglomerate formed. At the very earliest, it was in existence by 522 BBY, but it already had considerable wealth and political power at that point, so it probably formed earlier, possibly during the early centuries of the Great Peace of the Republic. Regardless of its origins, the Techno Union quickly rose to become one of the most powerful corporations in the galaxy. Its membership expanded to not only include the titans of heavy manufacturing and high technology, but also shipping magnates, expanding the conglomerate's control over commerce. The Techno Union outright acquired a number of planets which it had stripped of resources to sell for profit, and it began dictating some of its lesser members' manufacturing for its own ends. The Techno Union even received representation in the Galactic Senate, and it was also allowed to establish a private military. Before the Clone Wars, the big players in many major industries were all Techno Union members. In the field of starship construction, Techno Union members included such giants as Kuat Drive Yards, the Corellian Engineering Corporation, the Fondor Guild of Starship Rights, and Republic CNR Systems, some of the leading manufacturers of both commercial starships and capital ships. In weapons manufacturing, both Blastech Industries and Balmoran Arms were Techno Union members, as was Fethan Otror Scalable Assemblies, an Utapowan firm that specialized in self-construction weapons factories, but also made starfighters. The Tej Company, a massive megacorporation involved in everything from starship construction to restaurant chains, was also a Techno Union member, as well as the small, Mustafar-based mining company Klega Corporation. Of course, the Techno Union was most infamous for droid manufacturing, and virtually all of the galaxy's main droid makers were at least affiliated with the Techno Union, especially those that produced battle droids. Bactoid Industries, for one, was a Techno Union subsidiary, as were its own subsidiaries Bactoid Combat Automata, Bactoid Armor Workshop, and Bactoid Fleet Ordnance, the firms responsible for designing and manufacturing the CIS's infamous battle droids. Other battle droid manufacturers affiliated with the Techno Union included two other infamous CIS suppliers, Hawar Chal Engineering and the Colocoid Creation Nest, as well as the Geonosian Industries, whose own subsidiaries included Gordal Weaponsmiths and Hupla Pasatisk Shipwrights Collective. Holowan Laboratories, which manufactured the IG series assassin droids, was another Techno Union member, as were Arakid Industries, Kalabak Industries, and Viper Sensor Intelligence Systems, the last of which was forcibly required by an Arakid droid army shortly before the Clone Wars during a patent dispute. Beyond its vast membership, not much is known about the Techno Union's internal structure. The conglomerate's headquarters was on the core world Skako, and by the time of the Clone Wars, the cartel was dominated by Skakoan industrialists. While the Techno Union's overall membership was diverse, Skakoans made up most of the conglomerate's upper leadership, and they also dominated the ranks of the corporation's subdivisions. Only two positions within the Techno Union's upper hierarchy are known: the conglomerate's leader, who received the title of foreman, and the Techno Union's senator. Around the time of the Battle of Naboo, the Techno Union senator was Wat Tambor. By the time of the Clone Wars, Tambor had risen to the position of foreman, making him the overall head of the conglomerate, as well as the overseer of several of its subsidiaries. In Legends, after the Techno Union sided with the CIS, its representatives were expelled from the Senate, but Senator Goom Sam of the Hadar sector remained in the Techno Union's pocket and represented its interests. Apart from the Techno Union Research and Development Wing, of which little is known, the only Techno Union subdivision we have information on is its private military, the Techno Union Droid Army. While the Techno Union had a private droid army for decades prior, just before the Clone Wars, it completely redesigned its droid army to resemble the Trade Federation droid army. The Techno Union droid army consisted of vast numbers of Bactoid B1, B2, and OOM battle droids, supported by LM-432 crab droids, Octoptara combat and Magnatri droids, and J1 semi-autonomous proton cannons, all of which were directly produced by the Techno Union. For starfighters, the Techno Union relied on Hawar Chal Vulture droids and Fethan Otror Mankvim 418 light interceptors, while its main capital ship was the Techno Union manufactured Hardcell class interstellar transport, although the Techno Union also designed much larger vessels, including the Mark I Bulwark class battleship. During the Clone Wars, the Techno Union enhanced these forces with Arakid chameleon droids and Bactoid B3 and CB3 specialty battle droids. These forces were all commanded by battle droid commanders, tactical droids, or at the highest levels, organic officers, the most notable of these organic officers being Admiral Duaningo, who commanded the Techno Union's bulwark fleet at Foreroast. The Techno Union also made limited use of organic Skakoan commandos, but it generally relied on droids, more so than any other separatist megacorporation. All of the Techno Union droid army's assets were manufactured by the Techno Union and/or its subsidiaries, as were the infamous Droidica, Hawatchal's C-9979 landing craft, the Manta droid sub-fighter and mini-sub, and Bactoid Armor Workshop's AAT, MTT, STAP, PAC, and Ostrakoda class gunship. The Techno Union also had a hand in manufacturing the droids and vehicles used by the other Separatist Council factions. The Techno Union also produced other combat droids not used by the CIS, such as the E-522 assassin droid, as well as a variety of non-military assets, including the Techno Union holodroid, the Mustafar panning droid, and the Shekelesh class freight gunship. Of course, the Techno Union also had a presence on a number of key planets spread across the galaxy. While their corporate headquarters was on Skako, the Techno Union's most valuable planets were its manufacturing worlds. Metalorn and Foundry, which were owned directly by the Techno Union, were the most important of these, but other important ones included Geonosis and the Geonosian colony Hypori. The Techno Union had droid factories on Mechas 3, Telti, Ord Cestus, Tar Morden, and Balmorra, among other worlds. It owned Foreroast and its ancient shipyards, and it also had a stake in the shipyards of Fondor and Bilbringi. The Techno Union also owned the mining world Mustafar, which was a literal gold mine for the conglomerate, and it also had significant facilities on Volpta and above Listerhol. Seleucami served as one of the Techno Union's main strongholds, hosting droid factories and secret research facilities. Other research facilities were hosted on Kieta, Bearpaw, and Nelvan. During the Clone Wars, the Techno Union occupied the planets Zagobah and Ryloth for long periods of time, turning them into strongholds in their own right. In the decades leading up to the Clone Wars, the executives of the Techno Union were in contact with Hego Damask, the day-to-day guise of Darth Plagueis, who slowly alienated them from the Republic. This led to the Techno Union being one of the first megacorporations to throw its lot in with the CIS at the start of the Separatist crisis, despite the misgivings of some Techno Union executives. This caused a split within the conglomerate, however, as strongly loyalist Techno Union companies left over its separatist leanings. These included Kuat Drive Yards, Tej Co., the Corellian Engineering Corporation, and Blastech Industries, all of which went on to supply the Republic military during the Clone Wars. In 22 BBY, Wat Tambor signed a treaty pledging the Techno Union droid army to the CIS, earning him a seat in the Separatist Council and formally committing the Techno Union to the Separatist cause. During the Clone Wars, the Techno Union put its mech worlds, factories, and shipyards to work producing war material for the Confederacy, especially battle droids. The Techno Union and its subsidiaries manufactured most of the Confederacy's battle droids during the war, and it also supplied Crab droids, Octoptara droids, and Mankvim interceptors to the war effort. The Union also allowed other separatist corporations to make use of its shipyards, building fleets of Commerce Guild and Banking Clan capital ships. The Techno Union's holdings seceded from the Republic, and many Techno Union worlds became part of the Foundry of the Confederacy, the CIS's main industrial region. Occasionally, Techno Union forces operated independently of separatist forces on their own missions, or they took direct command of CIS operations. Early in the war, Foreman Wat Tambor led the Techno Union droid army in an invasion and occupation of Ryloth, which resulted in Tambor's capture by Republic forces after the planet was liberated. Tambor escaped Republic captivity, however, and he did the same thing to Zagobah shortly thereafter, occupying it until the Republic retook the planet during the Outer Rim sieges. At the very end of the war, the Techno Union did the same thing yet again, this time to Utapau. The Techno Union was one of the most crucial players in the Separatist war effort, and its forces were one of the biggest parts of the CIS military, surpassed only by the Trade Federation's contributions. At first, the war was quite profitable for the Techno Union and for Foreman Wat Tambor personally. As the war went on, however, this began to change. The Republic conquered the key Techno Union stronghold of Metalorn as well as Geonosis early in the war, while Forost was placed under siege by the Republic Navy. The Forost blockade prevented the Techno Union from making use of its biggest shipyard, and while the blockade was broken in 20 BBY by Admiral Ningo and the Bulwark Fleet, the Bulwark Fleet was destroyed after a rampage through the core worlds, and Forost fell to the Republic. During the late war, Skako itself fell to the Republic as well, and the Techno Union's leaders were forced to retreat to the Outer Rim. While many key Techno Union leaders were entrenched on Seleucami, leading to the grueling 5-month-long siege of Seleucami, Wat Tambor joined the rest of the Separatist Council on Utapau and then Mustafar. The Republic ultimately seized many Techno Union holdings during the Outer Rim sieges, and after the death of General Grievous, Wat Tambor was killed by Darth Vader on Mustafar alongside the rest of the Separatist Council. With Tambor's death, the Techno Union was left leaderless, and with so many of its assets already lost, it was powerless to resist as the Empire nationalized it after the end of the Clone Wars. The Empire promptly liquidated the Techno Union, breaking up its holdings and handing off its remaining assets to loyalist companies, including a few former Techno Union members, most notably Tej Ko. As its conduct on Ryloth showed, the Techno Union was ruthless, greedy, and exploitative, but it still had nothing on the Commerce Guild, the worst of the Separatist megacorporations. The Commerce Guild was a trade conglomerate that specialized in mining, though it also had a hand in droid and starship manufacturing, and it was infamous for its rampant exploitation of its employees and consumers alike, as well as just about anything else it could get its hands on. The Commerce Guild and its sociopathic leaders were ruthless in their pursuit of profit, which they extracted from their assets in every conceivable way. The Commerce Guild formed during the early centuries of the Great Peace of the Republic, and it was in operation by about 700 BBY. It quickly rose to become a major trade conglomerate through the ruthless acquisition of other companies, allowing it to control entire industries of the galactic market. The Commerce Guild was known for placing extreme pressure on smaller companies in fields it wanted to control through a mix of ruthless competition and threats from its private security forces, wearing its competitors down until they agreed to join the Commerce Guild. All guild subsidiaries were expected to operate with the same ruthlessness as the guild leadership, prioritizing profit over all else, including the lives of their employees. As the guild grew increasingly powerful, it began buying up entire planets, stripping them of all valuable resources and making their people into indentured laborers. Although it didn't have Senate representation, the guild still had substantial political power, and many senators were in the guild's pocket. The guild was led by the Presidente of the Commerce Guild, who presided over the Commerce Guild Chief of Staff. The guild had a sprawling internal bureaucracy led by division chiefs. By the time of the Clone Wars, much of the Commerce Guild's upper hierarchy was filled by Gossams, as the guild controlled the Gossam homeworld of Castel, and most of the species worked for it. The guild's association with the Gossam predated its ownership of Castel, however. From the beginning, the guild's headquarters, along with many of its greatest strongholds, was on the jungle planet Felucia, a Gossam colony which the guild was in complete control of by 700 BBY. By the time of the Clone Wars, the Presidente of the Commerce Guild was the ruthless Gossam Shu Mei, the former chief of property resources. Mei's chief aide, Kat Min, was also a Gossam, and she regularly accompanied Mei to meetings of the Separatist Council. Shu Mei embodied the ruthlessness of the Commerce Guild, decrying Republic regulations as a moralistic waste and showing no qualms with murder or exploitation in the name of profit. Even when pretending to care about her employees, Xu Mei was only capable of voicing her appreciation in a cold and dehumanizing way, as shown by her remarks on the death of Commerce Guild miners during the Battle of Basadro. The callous lack of value shown by the Republic in this exercise is appalling. Each of those miners represented a hard worker with invested skill levels. The synergistic aggregate of the village total was far beyond the worth of each individual. Other powerful figures within the Commerce Guild were Biolas Bribs, CEO of Sorosub and President of the Celestian Council, former pirate Iako Stark, Soreg the Hutt of the Vasadi clan, and the corrupt senators Bogdivinian and Nemrilio im Drokubak. Mining was the Commerce Guild's main industry, and through its subsidiaries, the guild all but controlled mining across much of the galaxy in the Republic's final centuries. The Commerce Guild's biggest mining subsidiary was the Mining Guild itself, one of the oldest and most powerful institutions in the galaxy. The Mining Guild predated the Republic and controlled billions of nameless, uninhabited, metal-rich planets spread across the galaxy, making it the Commerce Guild's most valuable subsidiary. Other mining companies were part of the Commerce Guild as well, including Off-World Mining Corporation, Dovala Mining, the Arcona Mineral Harvest Corporation, and the Sorosub Corporation. The Commerce Guild owned several mining worlds outright, including Escate, and it also controlled mines on Basadro, Seleucami, Raxus Prime, and Korriban. The Commerce Guild was also involved in manufacturing and food production, among other fields. The RD's beverage company was a Commerce Guild member, and the guild controlled the agri-world Tired Kant. One of the guild's most prized members, Sorosub, manufactured weapons, communications technology, droids, land speeders, and starships on top of its involvement in mining, and another Commerce Guild subsidiary, Commerce Guild Manufacturers, produced war droids for use in the guild's private droid army. The guild controlled shipyards on Celeste and Mintoween, maintained a trading station near Bafash, and it also had holdings on Muga and the industrial world Castel, the Gossam homeworld. Like the Trade Federation and Techno Union, the Commerce Guild was allowed to have its own private military forces. On some guild planets, it enforced its will through local forces such as the Escate Guard and the Celestin Home Guard. But the guild's main force was the Commerce Guild Punitive Security Forces, a private army that the guild used to enforce its will on the planets it controlled. The Punitive Security Forces were deployed to provide security for guild executives, suppress riots and strikes on guild mining worlds, and intimidate the guild's competitors, either through the threat of or use of deadly force. The Punitive Security Forces had 3 subdivisions: its Organic Forces, its Droid Army, and its Naval Forces. The Commerce Guild's organic forces were fairly small. Some of the Punitive Security Forces' organic personnel were guards or patrol officers meant for actual security duties, but the Commerce Guild also made use of the Gossam Commandos, elite organic soldiers from Castel. The Gossam Commandos were well trained and well equipped, outfitted in heavy armor and armed with heavy repeating blaster rifles, as well as heavier shoulder-mounted blaster cannons. The Gossam Commandos could only be deployed on the orders of Presidente Xu Mei herself. During the Clone Wars, they fought in the Battle of Morja, murdered Syrian President Borotara, and guarded Xu Mei's bioweapons facilities on Felucia. Gossam Commandos, as well as other organic Commerce Guild soldiers, were organized into squads of 6, including a single squad leader. Commando squads were organized into troops of 6 squads each, commanded by a security chief, and 6 troops made up a division, led by a division commander. The Punitive Security Forces also made extensive use of battle droids, which made up the bulk of the Commerce Guild's ground forces. The Punitive Security Forces droid infantry was mostly composed of B1 and B2 battle droids, although the guild also made use of chameleon droids. These droids were supported by larger and more powerful spider droids, which served as droid tanks and heavy battle droids. Produced by Commerce Guild manufacturers and Bactoid Armor Workshop, the Guild's array of spider droids included the DSD-1 Dwarf Spider Droid, the ADSD Advanced Dwarf Spider Droid, and the OG-9 Homing Spider Droid. These spider droids were the punitive security force's most prized ground assets, as well as the Guild's biggest contribution to the Separatist army. The punitive security forces divided its droids up into units based on their composition rather than maintaining a standard order of battle. These included chameleon droid units, consisting of 5 to 25 chameleon droids, heavy dwarf spider droid units consisting of an ADSD and a squad of B1 or B2 battle droids, a dwarf spider droid unit consisting of 4 DSD-1s or ADSDs, usually deployed in groups of 2 to 5 units, and the homing spider droid unit, consisting of an OG-9 and 4 DSD-1s. For its space forces, the Commerce Guild produced 2 little-seen models of starfighter, the Commerce Guild Fleet Patrol Craft and the Commerce Guild Bomber, the former of which was heavily modelled on the Geonosian Nantex-class starfighter. For capital ships, the Commerce Guild made use of corvettes of an unknown class, Diamond-class cruisers, and Recusant-class light destroyers. In the final decades of the Republic, the Commerce Guild was one of the most powerful corporations in the galaxy. Its power was such that, when Castel fell into a severe economic depression, it was able to simply buy the planet and effectively enslave its people. Upon becoming the Guild's chief of property resources, Shu Mei was able to free her people and restore Castel's economy, but she then bought up the planet personally and raised tribute on her people, demanding high rent just for living on Castel. This ruthlessness earned her the title of Presidente, and she would dominate Commerce Guild policy for the rest of her career. In 27 BBY, the Commerce Guild attempted to lobby the Senate into giving a de facto monopoly over banking in the Outer Rim, bribing senators into supporting the measure and attempting to manufacture scandals to destroy the senators that opposed it. When this was exposed, the bill was voted down, but the Guild never faced any accountability. 5 years later, during the Separatist crisis, the Commerce Guild became involved with Count Dooku, providing him with battle droids and cover during a mission to Korriban and conspiring to orchestrate the secession of the planet Ancion in 22 BBY. Shortly after the Ancion incident, Shu Mei pledged the Commerce Guild and its resources to the CIS, but she insisted on doing so secretly, as she still had misgivings about committing treason against the Republic. This secrecy didn't last, however, as the Battle of Geonosis saw the punitive security forces take to the battlefield as part of the new Separatist droid army, and the Guild became heavily involved in the Clone Wars. The assets of the punitive security forces made up a large part of the new CIS military. Commerce Guild spider droids were a frequent sight on the war's many battlefields, while Commerce Guild light destroyers made up part of the core of the Confederate Navy. Shu Mei was heavily involved in Separatist propaganda efforts, and Commerce Guild mining worlds provided the Confederacy's military-industrial complex with enormous amounts of resources. The Commerce Guild also took advantage of the Clone Wars to conquer planets and forcibly acquire competitors based within Separatist space, further increasing its power. But the Clone Wars ultimately didn't go well for the Commerce Guild. Toward the end of the war, Celeste and Castel, two of the Guild's most important possessions, fell to the Republic, while Felucia came under siege, becoming the site of several of the war's bloodiest battles. During the Outer Rim sieges, as Republic forces came close to taking Felucia, Shu Mei was forced to flee the planet, activating a failsafe that would poison its water table as she did so. She perished with the rest of the Separatist Council on Mustafar, following which what remained of the Commerce Guild fell under Imperial control. After the end of the Clone Wars, the Commerce Guild was nationalized and liquidated. Some of its assets were handed off to loyalist companies, while the rest were taken over by the Commerce Guild's most powerful former subsidiaries, the Mining Guild and Sorosub, which escaped nationalization by pledging fealty to the new order. The most powerful of the separatist cartels was the InterGalactic banking clan, one of the oldest institutions in the galaxy. The IGBC was a union of the galaxy's largest banks, the primary backer of the Republic credit and most other currencies, and it effectively controlled financing across the galaxy. This gave the IGBC immense influence over the galactic economy as well as over the galactic government. Beings across the galaxy kept their money in IGBC accounts, and the banking clan's investments and ventures were vital to the success of many corporations and planetary economies. All of the galaxy's biggest corporations made transactions through the IGBC, as did just about everyone else. On top of controlling the flow of credits throughout the galaxy, the banking clan was also a power player in communications and data transmission. It had its own private holonet, which was more secure and reliable than the Republic holonet. The IGBC was well known for its shrewd business sense, high interest rates, and the viciousness with which it went after its debtors. The Intergalactic banking clan was ancient, with some of its member banks dating back to the formation of the Republic. The IGBC itself was founded by the Muns, whose homeworld, Munilinst, was loaded with all manner of precious metals. After making first contact with outsiders and discovering that aliens considered these metals extremely valuable, the Muns got into interstellar finance, using Munilinst's vast wealth reserves to back currencies and finance various ventures. The Muns' wealth allowed them to quickly take over the banking sector, forming the IGBC and uniting most of the Republic's existing major banks under its banner. The IGBC became the primary backer of the Republic credit, the main financier of Republic colonization efforts, the bankroller of the galaxy's biggest corporations, and even the Republic's own financial lifeline. This was all despite the fact that Munilinst and the banking clan's other strongholds, Scipio and Megiddo, were all located far beyond the borders of the Republic in the depths of wild space. While this made it very difficult for those in the Republic to get to Munilinst, it also made the banking clan system more secure, as the banking clan worlds were insulated from the Republic's wars. Throughout the Old Republic era, the IGBC dictated the flow of wealth between the core worlds and the Outer Rim, and it kept the galactic economy going even during the Republic's darkest hours. It was where local governments, corporations, and even the Senate itself went whenever they needed loans, and its funds helped kickstart and maintain many of the galaxy's great shipping cartels and trade guilds. The banking clan remained neutral in the Republic's many wars, and it did business with some of the Republic's enemies as well as the Republic itself. After roughly 20,000 years of doing business from the depths of wild space, the Mun worlds finally became a part of the Republic proper sometime around 3000 BBY, but the IGBC was still able to insulate itself and keep operating through the new Sith Wars, the last and most devastating conflict of the Old Republic era. Despite the wholesale collapse of galactic civilization toward the end of this period, when the Republic orbit ceased to exist, the holonet went offline, and large swaths of the galaxy were left in anarchy, the banking clan kept running, and Republic senators, Jedi Knights, and Sith Lords alike had accounts with it. When the new Sith Wars ended and the Republic began to rebuild, the Intergalactic banking clan poured money back into the galactic economy, facilitating the Republic's reconstruction and kickstarting the golden age of the Republic. The IGBC would remain a power player in the Republic for the remainder of its history, and it continued to grow even more unfathomably wealthy. By the time of the Clone Wars, the IGBC itself was the galaxy's biggest bank, but many other large banks were IGBC members as well. The dominant member banks were the Munilinst banking clan, the Bank of Argal, the latter of which was the main core world's IGBC branch. Other members included the Intergalactic Bank of Kuat, the Dressian Kiolish Merchant Bank, Bank Nero 11, and Damask Holdings, the latter of which also served as a major lobbying group. From the beginning, the IGBC was controlled by the Muns and headquartered on their homeworld of Munilinst, and it remained that way by the time of the Clone Wars, although by that point, the organization had many non-Muns in it as well. Mun space remained the core of IGBC territory, the location of the banking clan's greatest strongholds and vaults. This region was located in the northern part of the new territories, deep in the Outer Rim, spread across the Carrion, Obtrexta, Clacus, and Albario sectors. Apart from Unilinst itself, the IGBC headquarters and the location of its reserves of precious metals, banking clan strongholds in this region included Scipio, the location of the IGBC's main vaults and auxiliary headquarters, Megiddo, a major Mun colony and banking clan vault world, and Sojourn, a moon home to an IGBC retreat where powerful Muns of the Damask clan hosted retreats for the galaxy's wealthy elite. Outside of Mun space, the IGBC's most important planet was Argal, home to its ancient banks, many important vaults, and an IGBC arcology. A larger and similarly important IGBC arcology was on Coruscant. This facility housed the central computers for the banking clan's private datanet. The banking clan also controlled banks on Kuat and Nero 11, among many other worlds, and it operated transfer stations across the galaxy, as exemplified by the Cyblock Transfer Station. The IGBC also maintained remote and highly secretive vault stations and communications relays outside of the galaxy itself, both in extragalactic space and in the Rishi Maze. The IGBC also controlled loads of other assets that had nothing to do with banking, obtained through careful investment or seized when their original owners defaulted on loan repayments. It owned the droid manufacturers Flut Design Systems and Orvalvo Techworks, the vehicle maker Z Gamot Turnbull Gupat Corporation, and the starship manufacturer Gwori Revolutionary Industries, the latter of which built capital ships for the banking clan's private fleet. The IGBC had a stake in the Cog Hive 7 prison and many other companies, and it even oversaw droid weapons and starship manufacturing through its subsidiaries. Munilinst and Megiddo were home to droid factories and military shipyards during the Clone Wars. The banking clan maintained other droid factories on Argal and the space station Kea orbital platform, while it had shipyards on Gwori and at many of its extragalactic satellite facilities. The IGBC employed vast numbers of financiers, accountants, and lawyers, as well as administrators, bureaucrats, and security personnel. Most Muns were affiliated with the banking clan in one way or another, but the IGBC was still a pretty diverse organization, also employing significant numbers of humans, Eotrans, Nemoidians, Givens, Gran, Snivians, Bith, and Ishi Tibbs. The Intergalactic Banking Clan was led by a chairman. At the time of the Clone Wars, the chairman of the IGBC was San Hill. Other high-ranking IGBC personnel included Vice Chair of Communications Lo Vapit, Kos, the Vice Chairman of Galactic Accounts, and the Core 5, the Board of Directors of the Scipio Banks, led by Clu Lesser. Rush Clovis served as the Senator for Scipio and later, briefly, as the Administrator of the Scipio Banks, while Nix Card and Max Plane represented the IGBC directly in the Senate. Kar Damask, the father of Darth Plagueis, once served the IGBC as Administrator of Megiddo, Director of the Treasury Branch, and finally, IGBC Chairman. The Intergalactic Banking Clan also had its own private military, the euphemistically named Collections and Security Division, which it used for debt collection and for security at its many vaults and strongholds. The banking clan had more of a need for this army than any other separatist megacorporations, as its vaults were high-value targets that required extreme security. But the IGBC nonetheless abused its security forces to intimidate debtors, coerce junior parties into agreeing to its loan terms, and seizing the assets of anyone that defaulted on banking clan loans. The oldest part of the Collections and Security Division was the Iotran Guard, an ancient Iotran paramilitary with a long history of providing the Muns with bodyguards, vault security, and debt collectors. The Iotrans were disciplined, well-trained, and loyal, equipped with heavy armor and armed with powerful blasters. They handled the IGBC's most important guard duties, protecting its vaults, providing security on Munilist, and serving as bodyguards for Chairman Hill and other high-ranking banking clan executives. During the Clone Wars, the captain of the Iotran Guard was Ricklon Tost, who became a feared Separatist officer during the Clone Wars. The Iotran Guard was the most elite organic unit in the Collections and Security Division, but not the only one. The division also employed other organics, most notably Muns and humans, as guards and soldiers, and most of the division's officers were Muns. The core of the Collections and Security Division's ground forces, however, was a droid army modeled on the Trade Federations. This army consisted of B1 and B2 battle droids, supported by a few of the banking clan's own combat droid models. Most prominently, these included several series of combat droids designed by Flut Design Systems and acquired by the IGBC when Flut defaulted on one of its loans. These included the IG Lancer Droid Cavalry, as well as IG-86 Assassin Droids and IG-100 Magna Guards. These troops were backed by columns of Bactoid Armor Workshop ground armored tanks and Haor Chal Engineering IG-227 Hellfire droids. Collections and Security Division battle droids or organic personnel were grouped into squads of 9, led by a sergeant. 5 squads made up a troop, commanded by a lieutenant. 5 troops and a section of 5 Hellfire droids made up a brigade, commanded by a captain, and 5 brigades made up a division, commanded by a colonel. Notable Collections and Security Division officers included Commander Horgo Shrive and General Grievous, both of whom later became infamous as leaders of the CIS droid army. The banking clan also maintained a massive navy, which primarily consisted of munificent-class star frigates, which were manufactured by the thousands at the IGBC's extragalactic shipyards. These fleets provided protection for banking clan worlds, but they also transported hordes of precious metals and war material between banking clan holdings, and they also served as mobile nodes of the IGBC's private holonet. The banking clan also employed Techno Union hard cell class transports for troop transport, BC-714 luxury transport for transport of high-ranking personnel, and massive orbital gun platforms for the defense of its most important planets. One of the highest-ranking officers in the banking clan fleet was Admiral Pors Tonith, who went on to be a leader of the CIS Navy. During the Great Peace of the Republic, the IGBC played a vital role in the Sith's plans from very early on. Shortly after the end of the new Sith Wars, Darth Bane discovered that the Sith Lord Quartus had embezzled tons of money from the Brotherhood of Darkness and kept it in IGBC accounts, which Bane promptly took over. This became the basis of a massive fortune Bane and his heirs used to fund their schemes. Many of Bane's heirs were closely involved with the IGBC, including Darth Tenebrous and, most notably, Darth Plagueis. Plagueis, of course, was a Mun, and his public persona, Hego Damask, was a high-ranking IGBC executive, giving him considerable influence over the galactic economy. Plagueis also used his influence within the banking clan to guarantee funding for the Republic's clone army and a variety of key weapons manufacturers, and he used his business connections to bring the members of what would later become the Separatist Council together. When the Separatist crisis began, the InterGalactic banking clan played a vital role in ensuring that Count Dooku's new Confederacy of Independent Systems was viable. The IGBC backed a new currency for the Confederacy and made it easier for newly seceded worlds to mint their own currencies, something that proved quite profitable since the rulers of many of these systems didn't know what they were getting into and didn't read the fine print on their agreements. As the economies of many systems were destroyed by the Separatist crisis, they turned to the IGBC for aid, even at the cost of punishing interest rates. All told, the banking clan did quite well for itself during the Separatist crisis, although it maintained that it was a neutral institution. Shortly before the Clone Wars, IGBC chairman Sand Hill became a member of the Separatist Council and pledged the banking clan's military forces and financial support to the Confederacy. However, he made clear that this was a non-exclusive agreement. The IGBC officially remained neutral and provided loans and financing to both sides, although its leadership favored the Confederacy and most of the collections and security division was rolled into the Separatist droid army. The banking clan attempted to maintain this neutrality throughout the Clone Wars to varying degrees of success. Most of the Mun worlds, prominently including Munilinst and Mygeeto, openly supported the Confederacy, becoming major Separatist military strongholds. While many bankers on Munilinst attempted to remain neutral, for the most part, the Confederacy held power on Munilinst, while Mygeeto was firmly Separatist. Scipio remained strictly neutral and dealt evenly with both sides, while Argao, located deep in the core, worked almost exclusively with the Republic and feigned neutrality, although IGBC officials there were caught working with the Separatists on a few occasions. 4 months into the Clone Wars, the IGBC was dealt a blow when the Republic invaded Munilinst, conquering the planet after a massive and destructive battle. Munilinst came under Republic military occupation after this, and IGBC chairman Sand Hill was captured, though he later escaped. The openly Separatist-aligned parts of the banking clan relocated to Mygeeto, which became the banking clan's primary military stronghold. The Republic attempted to take Mygeeto beginning in 21 BBY, beginning the largest battle of the war. Meanwhile, with Munilinst in ruins and under occupation, the IGBC relocated its headquarters to neutral Scipio, and it was able to remain stable there until 20 BBY, when a corruption scandal forced out the Core 5, who were replaced with former Senator Rush Clovis. Clovis was blackmailed by Count Dooku into violating the neutrality of the Scipio banks, prompting a Republic invasion of the planet. Shortly thereafter, the Galactic Senate voted to cede regulation of the banks to Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. During the Outer Rim sieges, Mun space became a battlefield, and the Battle of Mygeeto heated up. Many IGBC strongholds fell to the Republic, and Sand Hill was forced to flee to Mustafar with the rest of the Separatist Council, where he was murdered by Darth Vader shortly before the end of the Clone Wars. Following the end of the war and the deactivation of the droid army, the IGBC's remaining holdings came under Imperial occupation. Many leading Mun separatists and IGBC executives fled across the void of Chapani to the Seotrix sector, where they established a short-lived separatist holdout, but for the most part, the IGBC came under Imperial control. However, unlike the other separatist megacorporations, the InterGalactic banking clan wasn't nationalized by the Empire, which allowed it to remain in operation as a private enterprise. The reason for this was simple. The IGBC was just too powerful within the galactic economy, and the Emperor feared that the economy would implode if the banking clan was dissolved. Instead, the Empire settled for marginalizing the Muns themselves, stuffing the newly vacated upper ranks of the IGBC leadership with humans loyal to the New Order. Once that was done, the Empire kept a close eye on the banking clan and stationed Imperial troops and administrators on Munilinst and its other strongholds, but the banking clan was still allowed to operate more or less independently, now the primary backer of the Imperial credit. The IGBC supported the Empire during the early Galactic Civil War and remained loyal to the New Order after the Empire fragmented following the Battle of Endor. Mind you, it didn't have much choice in the matter. Munilinst remained under Imperial control all through the Galactic Civil War, as it was located in one of just 8 sectors that the New Republic never liberated. As the New Republic rose, the IGBC returned to playing both sides, becoming the creditor of both the New Republic and several Imperial remnant factions. Within the remnants of the Empire, the IGBC became a bit of a power player, controlling which warlords got the best financing. The IGBC threw most of its weight behind the Pentastar alignment, a heavily armed Imperial remnant that controlled the space around Munilinst. The Pentastar alignment eventually degraded into the capital R Imperial remnant, all that remained of what had once been a galaxy-spanning empire, of which Munilinst was one of its most important possessions. This gave the banking clan increasing influence over the remnant, ultimately making what was left of the empire as beholden to it as the Republic and CIS had been. Lastly, we have the Corporate Alliance, another powerful and ruthless conglomerate. The Corporate Alliance, similar to the Techno Union and Trade Federation, was a negotiating body for the galaxy's largest corporations, mediating during disputes and facilitating price fixing. The wealth and power of the Corporate Alliance's members made the alliance wealthy and powerful as well, with substantial political influence. The Corporate Alliance encouraged its employees and consumers alike to identify with it in a quasi-religious way, giving it even greater influence. We know less about the Corporate Alliance than other major separatist megacorporations. There's no information about when it was formed, and the only known subsidiary of the Corporate Alliance is Leth Merchandising, although the alliance was also involved in the production and distribution of retail goods as well as in heavy manufacturing. The Korrivars were heavily involved with the Corporate Alliance, making up parts of its upper management and much of its workforce. The Corporate Alliance's headquarters was on Mercana near the Tyon cluster, but it also maintained a strong foothold on Korriva, a major fortress, and multiple droid factories on Bomis Kori 4, and a presence on the agri-worlds Morja, Barlok, and Ochitul, among many other worlds. The Corporate Alliance was run by the Korrivar-dominated Corporate Alliance Directorate, an executive board led by the Alliance's ruling magistrate. At the time of the Clone Wars, the Corporate Alliance magistrate was Pascal Argente. His chief aide was fellow Korrivar Denaria Key. Pascal Argente also served as the senator for Korrivar before the planet's secession during the Separatist crisis, while the Corporate Alliance was represented in the Separatist Parliament by Senator Vo Attel. The Corporate Alliance, as with other separatist megacorporations, had its own private army, the Corporate Alliance Policy Administration Directorate. Similar to the Commerce Guild's private army, the CAPAD consisted of a mix of organic forces and droid units, plus a private navy. The Corporate Alliance's organic troops included a variety of mercenary forces, including the Freelance Mercenary Corps, the Vibroblade Brigade, and the Salician Special Forces. But the Corporate Alliance also had its own organic army, the Korrivar Fusiliers, an elite unit of Korrivar soldiers. Tasked with guarding Corporate Alliance facilities from sabotage and espionage, they wore ornate but effective body armor and carried Korrivar-manufactured blasters. Korrivar Fusiliers were well-trained and well-respected. Pascal Argente had 4 or 5 that he used as bodyguards, while General Grievous deployed Fusiliers in several key battles during the Outer Rim sieges. In battle, the Fusiliers made extensive use of artillery, assigning 2 combat engineers and a crew leader to each emplacement. Fusiliers were grouped into squads of 12 plus 1 sergeant. 3 squads made up a platoon, commanded by a lieutenant. 3 platoons made up a company, commanded by a captain. 3 companies made up a battalion, commanded by a colonel, and 3 battalions made up a regiment, commanded by a general. The Corporate Alliance's best ground officers were generals in the Korrivar Fusiliers, most notably including Oro Dasin. The Policy Administration Directorate also included a sizable droid army consisting of B-1 and B-2 battle droids. This army was supported by columns of NR-N99 Persuader-class droid tanks, as well as Corporate Alliance manufactured self-propelled artillery and energy pummels. The Corporate Alliance's tank droids were the most infamous parts of its arsenal, deployed against the corporation's competitors, those who protested its business practices, and those who opposed its development plans. The Corporate Alliance also maintained fleets of capital ships, typically augmented by Separatian privateers. These fleets primarily consisted of Fantail-class destroyers. The Corporate Alliance fleet was commanded by organic officers, most infamously including Admiral Trench. The Corporate Alliance used its military forces to enforce its expansionistic and often unfair business practices, silencing dissent and deploying tank droids against any irritants. The Corporate Alliance openly supported the Trade Federation's occupation of Naboo, and after the Battle of Naboo, it grew opposed to the Galactic Senate. During the Separatist crisis, the Corporate Alliance covertly supported Count Dooku, and it regulated its members' retail prices in a way that favored the Confederacy. On the eve of the Clone Wars, Magistrate Pasalagense pledged the Corporate Alliance's armies and resources to the CIS, and the Policy Administration Directorate's feared tank droids became part of the Separatist droid army. During the Clone Wars, the Corporate Alliance was part of the backbone of the Confederacy's economy, and its leaders were heavily involved with the war effort. Pasalagense personally oversaw Separatist forces in the First Battle of Kamino and the Battle of Yukio, and the Corporate Alliance's headquarters on Mokana played a host to the CIS shadow feed, the main CIS propaganda network. As with other Separatist corporations, however, the Corporate Alliance didn't fare well in the Clone Wars. Many of its planets were conquered by the Republic, and toward the end of the Outer Rim sieges, Mokana itself even came under assault, falling to the GAR in the last hours of the war. By that point, Pasalagense had long since fled to Mustafar, where he was executed by Darth Vader. With Pasal dead and Mokana now under Imperial occupation, the Corporate Alliance was nationalized and liquidated to the Empire, which handed off most of its assets to the Corporate Sector Authority, which many former Corporate Alliance personnel joined. So, that was our look at the main Separatist corporations during the Clone Wars. But what do you think? Would you like us to do more in-depth videos on any of these organizations in the future? What videos do you want to see from us? Let us know all that and more in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.